Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Pip Courtney. If you were asked to name which Australian native foods have gone mainstream, what would you pick? Many fall into the got potential category, but apart from kangaroo meat, which is exported, none have developed into significant industries except the macadamia nut. While they're well known now, the first commercial plantings only went in 40 years ago. As the big 4-0 has come round, the industry finds itself with much to celebrate, as Asia's growing appetite for macadamias is boosting sales and prices, leaving many to conclude the future is bright if they can just plant more trees. This building overlooking this view. What better place to celebrate the 40th birthday of Australia's most successful native food? And what better way to start than with a barbecue helmed by Australia's best-known chefs? Growers hope one day Australians will regard the macadamia as much as an icon as this house and this bridge. In farming terms, the macadamia is a mere pup compared to other nuts, but in 40 exciting, challenging and sometimes heartbreaking years, this young industry has made headway in acreage, marketing, agronomy and, where it matters, with the ultimate ambassadors, chefs.
Macadamia nuts will be in my kitchen and on my menus forever. It's very important. We need to celebrate this beautiful native ingredient.
I use them in cakes, muffins, slices, but I also love the versatility of them because they're so good in savoury dishes as well.
I mean, I always say it's the luxury nut, you know, as people kind of think of it, and it's that thing where you think, oh, macadamia, wow, you know, like when you eat one, it's pretty special.
The chef entrusted with devising a memorable menu said he had no problem showcasing the nut's versatility.
They're so rich and full of fat and good fats. You know, it adds a great rich creaminess to any dish. Obviously, you've got the flavour, that beautiful nutty flavour you get from the macadamias, and the texture. I think it will be a staple in Australian cuisine. It's a native nut to Australia. You know, why wouldn't you use it?
As growers dined in style, harvesters were sweeping up a crop estimated at 40,000 tonnes. After a series of dismal years with poor prices, shocking weather and falls in land prices, they could be forgiven for being down. But prices are strong and yields are good.
It's just a great relief to not only us but to every farmer, I think, in the area that we're having a reasonable crop this year.
Indeed, growers feel their industry is on the cusp of serious growth.
The Chinese nut in shell market that's just opened up has awoken a sleeping giant.
There are many markets that haven't even been tapped with macadamia nuts. We haven't even, we're not able to get macadamia nuts into India yet because there's just not enough supply to satisfy that level of demand.
As it marks 40 years in business, the industry's taking stock of its achievements. This range of products shows how far it's come from the early days when macadamias were a luxury salty nibble or chocolate treat.
It's one of the few products that's available in 8 aisles in the supermarket. Breakfast cereals, snack bars, fresh snacks, ice creams, confectionery, cooking ingredient, the list goes on and on. And now we're seeing it turn up in cosmetics and skin and body care products.
But the industry's also looking back to acknowledge the pioneers who started it all in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales. The first commercial plantings were in 1974. Growers emboldened at the time by the Hawaiians, who 30 years earlier had taken our nut and created an industry.
They had done a great job in starting a commercial industry for the macadamia nut. But it was a very localised one. They had a good market in the US and they had a confectionery market in Japan. That was essentially it.
They may have been 30 years behind, but a handful of Australians, showing their entrepreneurship as the Hawaiians, invested. Australia overtook Hawaii long ago. With 6 million trees now in the ground, the industry's worth $200 million a year.
If you look at some of the industries that were starting off in Australia around the time of the macadamia industry, like jojoba, alpacas, tea tree, these sorts of industries, I think we're almost unique in being a well-established, globally traded and commercially successful industry.
Jolyon Burnett says the industry's 750 growers owe the founders a debt for the direction they steered the industry in, like its focus on exports.
We've avoided so much of the supply and demand dynamic that operates on those industries that are locked into the Australian domestic market. We've been able to escape that by exporting over 70% of the product to over 40 countries around the world.
But perhaps the biggest gift the founders gave the industry was a compulsory levy.
The levy system has been absolutely fundamental to our success, and that's been ploughed into research and development and market development and market expansion. And both of those things have been absolutely fundamental to an industry that was really starting from ground zero.
Despite being novices, many of the early trees, like these, which are nudging 40, are still producing.
I think if the soils are looked after right and they're the right variety, there's no reason why they can't go on for another 39 years.
Can you believe that the industry's about to turn 40?
No, it's quite surprising actually when you think, certainly when you're involved with it from the start, you think, wow, where's all that time gone? But there's been some amazing changes in the last 39, 40 years.
One of the industry's old hands, Kim Wilson, has worked for Grey Plantations for 35 years. He remembers the maca crash of the late 80s, a crash, he says, the cottage industry had to have.
That was really the time where mechanical harvesters were introduced to the industry. And I think it really also sorted out the people that were serious about growing macadamias. So, in my words, it sort of got rid of the cowboys out of the industry.
Kim Wilson's boss, Sydney doctor George Gray, was typical of the early growers, a professional from Sydney. But not typical was the size of the operation he developed. From the first farm in 1975, the late Dr. Gray bought 2 more and then a nursery. Then 8 years ago, he made the radical decision to set up a 100,000 tree nursery and plant new orchards on much cheaper land 1,200 kilometres north in Mackay. The move bemused locals.
Initially they were sort of looking over the fence, or looking over the top of their sugarcane, I should say, and sort of saying, what in the hell are you guys doing? And, you know, this won't work in our environment up here. But now we're into our second harvest year up there. The trees are 6 years of age and we're into the second crop. They're starting to look a bit more serious and ask some genuine questions about what it's all on about.
Grey Plantations is big on innovation. It's commercialising some CSIRO micrografting research that will halve the time and cost of producing trees in a nursery. Apart from the tax advantages, an early investment driver was the area's beauty.
Do you think some people over-romanticised how easy it would be, that, you know, these big trees just pretty much look after themselves and prices are great and we can just go to Byron and lie on the beach and be macadamia farmer?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. That's I think has happened to a lot certainly in the early, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago when people came in thinking this was pretty easy money. I think they've had a wake-up call now that things have got a bit tougher. But yeah, it's a lot more to it than just watching the trees, watching the nut falls from the trees.
This is probably the most expensive farmland in Australia. But nearly a decade ago, prices were even higher.
A typical 100-acre farm or 40-hectare producing macadamia farm 7 or 8 years ago was probably selling between $2.2 and $2.5 million, and that's for a 40-hectare property without a house on it, but all infrastructure for macadamias. That same farm, probably 12 months ago, was selling for 1.1, 1.2 million, and so it's basically halved its price in that 4 or 5 years period. But I think that's hit its bottom and it's starting to climb back up now.
This industry, unlike any other in agriculture, apart from wine, has attracted cashed-up city professionals.
We have people who've made their money out of swimwear, out of concreting and construction, Qantas pilots, lawyers, doctors, cosmetic surgeons, people who've been in beauty products, in advertising, chemical engineering.
Lots of opinions and strong personalities.
Pip, you know too much. It does have its challenges, having people who have been the masters of their universe and now want to be the masters of this universe. And we welcome and appreciate that, but it has come a shock to many of them how uncontrollable farming often is.
One of those cashed-up amateurs was Doug Rowley, who bought in 20 years ago while working as an accountant in Sydney. After 10 years managing the farm from afar, he quit his office job and moved up to be a full-time farmer.
It's not, some idyllic pastoral pursuit where you listen to the gentle lowing of cattle and smell the freshly mown grass. You've just got to get out there and run it as a business. And unless you do that, then you're doomed to, well, I was not doomed to failure, but you are not going to succeed. I couldn't believe just how absorbing growing macadamias could become. I just loved every bit of it.
Doug Rowley was successful, but after 20 years, sold up. The physical nature of the work meant it was time.
Hey, how you going, buddy? Terrific, mate. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Good to see you.
How's it going?
Oh, I can't complain, Can't complain.
We caught up with him on his first visit to the farm since he sold it 14 months ago.
Well, I think the future is rosy, to say the least. I think that the new generation of farmers is becoming far more focused on cost control, more efficient forms of production.
Doug Rowley might be a bit rueful about the timing of his exit, for as he got out, the long-awaited Asian demand kicked in. Asia doesn't just want our nuts, it wants our expertise to start their own industries. 40 years of R&D means Australia has much to offer overseas growers as well as its own. One project in Bundaberg is causing much excitement.
These are subtropical and tropical tree crops that traditionally grow really large, which is hard to manage, but they also become productive as they get larger, more dense, less shade inside them. So we're trying to work with these crops to produce small tree, highly intensive systems that are still very productive.
I see a trellis. Are you going to try with macadamias what people did with apples?
That's the inspiration behind this. Apple productivity increased a huge amount over 50 years, and that's the inspiration behind this.
A breakthrough with dwarf trees or trellising would be transformative.
If we can move this forward 20%, 100% increase in productivity, and we're actually hoping for more than that, it'll be great for both growers, for the country, for processors. We had some visitors from Vietnam here yesterday. They are interested in setting up a large macadamia growing and possibly processing operation in Vietnam. And they came here basically to learn from us. Even though we feel we know very little, we probably in world terms do know a great deal.
Kim Wilson's consulted in China, Myanmar and Vietnam. But rather than see Asian expansion as a threat, he says it's good for Australia.
And the beauty of what's happening there, it's exposing macadamias to many, many more people throughout the world. The biggest issue in the worldwide macadamia industry is the inability to supply consistent product throughout the world. So the more countries that are producing macadamias we get on board, the more consistent supply of product we can supply.
Jolyon Burnett says if the Australian industry doesn't expand, it will miss out on growing overseas markets.
The industry desperately needs new investment. We have demand strongly outstripping supply, and we also have huge growth potential. We make up around 1% of the world trade in tree nuts. I would like to see in the next 40 years us be 10% of the world tree market. We have the product that's worthy of that share of the market.
In the 90s, several growers decided the best way to increase production was to move to Queensland, where land was cheaper and flatter. The centre of this northern push is Bundaberg, and one of the first to buy in was Phil Zadro. The Sydney property developer bought his first farm in New South Wales 35 years ago. It was meant to be a relaxing hobby.
Once I started, I wanted to do it well, and then it was imperative that it had to grow. So from one farm, you buy another farm, and then another farm, and then you go into processing and marketing, and then you don't have enough product to supply those markets, so you'll have to buy more farms. And this is where we are today.
What did the Bundaberg people think when you bought all that land and started planting trees?
Initially, they thought I was a nut. But as I continued to plant after a few years, I guess they saw me more as a threat to the cane industry than what they initially thought of me.
This new macadamia processing factory in Bundaberg is 50% owned by Phil Zadro. These bags hold nuts in the shell. They're headed for China and a market which didn't exist 2 years ago. But now orders are pouring in.
Yeah, we put some machinery in the off-season, so that at the start of this season we could actually supply nut and shell into that Chinese market, and it seems to be working very successfully at the moment.
Mr Zadro's 2,200 hectare Bundaberg operation employs 50 permanent staff and is still growing. But now Bundaberg's land is getting scarcer and more expensive, so Phil Zadro's looking for new ground, and he thinks emerald is next. 13 years ago, he invested in plantations in South Africa, making him now the world's biggest grower. He says South Africa is taking booming world demand more seriously than Australia.
South Africa are still planting big times, and within a matter of about 3 or 4 years from now, they will leave Australia way, way behind.
While the northern rivers attracted professionals outside agriculture, Bundaberg has attracted mostly farmers.
The farms in Bundaberg are the farms demonstrating the biggest growth, but they're also the farms that are now driving some of the greatest innovation in the industry. Some of them have been planted using GPS technology. They're using some really cutting-edge precision agriculture technologies. We're using unmanned flying vehicles to monitor the reflection of the reflectivity of the canopy, and then apply nutrition specific to individual rows and often individual trees within an orchard. So this is cutting-edge technology.
Every year, more cane farmers are giving macadamias a try. Bundaberg's Chris Hart abandoned cane in 2007.
Between drought and low prices of sugar, we thought there must be a better way of making a living. And we really enjoyed the farming side of things, so we had nut growers planting either side of us.
With yields growing every year, his punt on 9,000 trees is paying off.
When they're fully matured, they have perhaps 80, 90 tonne. So that should give us a comfortable lifestyle, I think. And we do everything ourselves, between my wife and myself.
While the focus on growth is in Queensland, the northern rivers won't fade away.
Healthier areas, but they're still not everywhere, and in patches there's good amounts of nuts, so we'll get...
New growers Tamara Williams and her husband Mike are the young face of the region's next phase as some of the early players retire.
We came up from Sydney to do some property development in Byron because we really liked the area and we thought it offered some good returns, and I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to become involved in what I believe is a growing industry worldwide.
The former investment banker's specialty was putting together property deals, and she hasn't lost her touch. She's just back from Asia, where she and Kim Wilson pitched the industry to investors.
From Kuala Lumpur, from China, Thailand, many different parts of Asia that were very interested in the macadamia industry.
They pushed a consolidation plan, something Tamara says boosted the almond industry in California.
There are over 500 farms owned in the Northern Rivers where many of the farms have 2,000 trees or less sitting on their farm. Bringing many farms together, it makes the profit that you can actually get per hectare higher because you can spread some fixed costs over a much larger number of planted hectares.
After several frustrating years when all went wrong, now markets and weather are coming right, favouring those who were patient. The job of steering the industry towards a quantum leap in size is Jolyon Burnett's. All he needs are investors with dollars and dreams. A few younger versions of Phil Zadro.
I wish I was 30 years younger. If I was 30 years younger, I would probably double and quadruple the industry overnight, knowing what I know today. Every morning when I wake up and I think about macadamias, I see the need for expansion. How are we going to supply all the increasing demand around the world, be as it may, nut and shell or as kernel? And I can't find an answer for that. The only answer that I can see is plant more trees.